So we're here in Stillwater, Oklahoma, visiting with Toccara Montgomery. He's become a distinguished member of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame this evening. And just what did you think when they gave you the call and said, hey, we'd like to invite you to be part of the Hall of Fame? That must have been an interesting time for you.
It definitely was. I think about it. I think when was it Leroy or Jack were one of the ones who reached out first, and they're like, "Hey, we got some exciting news for you. We want to let you know that you've been accepted as a distinguished member." And I was just like, "Really?" And I hadn't really thought about it because it took a moment to kind of just process what those words were. And I think I was talking to Kent Balo this weekend, and I was like, "This is really full circle," because when I started in that first girls tournament in Mount Vernon, Ohio, to now being in Stillwater as a distinguished member in the National Hall of Fame, I don't think at that time frame I ever would have thought that I would have made it to this point in the sport.
Yeah, and just think about it. I mean, what exactly got you into the sport? Because at the time, women's wrestling wasn't all that well known or popular or even available, right?
Yes.
What were the things that got you interested and kept you in wrestling?
I think ultimately, I was an athlete. I enjoyed doing sports. I enjoyed doing challenging sports. I came from a state recognized basketball team at East Tech High School where that was the thing. So we had not had, I believe, a wrestling team in over 40 years. And my coach at the time, Kip Flanick, came and made this announcement. Any guys or girls who want to come out for wrestling, come down after school at this time. And I remember thinking oh, wow, I didn't know girls wrestled. And so I gathered a couple of my closest girlfriends and made them go try out with me. And we all went and wrestled that first year. I think there was 7 of us, and 7 of us stayed around that entire first season. And then for myself and I think one other female wrestler, we actually went on and continued to wrestle at the University of the Cumberlands.
Yeah, and I mean, when did you start seeing success? I think you got pretty good pretty quick, right?
It doesn't feel that way. That first year was brutal. I remember getting pinned a lot. And I actually had a basketball teammate who came up to me one day because they were getting together, and I was like, "Oh, I can't make it. I'm going to go to wrestling practice this weekend." And she's like, "Wrestling practice? Why do you keep doing it? You're not even good at it." And at that time, I was like, I'm not sure. But I talked to someone else before, and it's just wrestling is just one of those sports that when it's for you, it's for you. It becomes all encompassing of what you do and who you are. And you just want to be in the mat room. You want to be out there drilling and wrestling, and you can put a bunch of wrestlers together. I'm surprised we haven't got kicked out of the hotel yet because
they're a few more hours.
Yeah,
so.
They're gonna hand fight. Wrestling can be done anywhere, anytime. So I think just the fact that it was new and the challenge of it, it was just one of those things that I didn't know it at the time, but wrestling was definitely my sport.
And you had success in high school, right?
Yes.
I mean, you were able to compete at the national level at a number of different levels, actually, right? And see success. What do you think brought about that success? Was it good coaching, natural abilities, just drive? I mean, a lot of kids start wrestling. They don't always go out and win big events like you were able to.
I think it was a lot of components that came together. One, the opportunity that Kip presented for the girls and I to go out and wrestle. And 2, that insanity that he kind of had as a wrestling coach where we were wrestling continuously. We went to, we would do everything as far as the high school wrestling, but Canada was relatively close. So then that's when he introduced freestyle wrestling. We would go up to Canada, I would say every weekend in the summer because they always had tournaments going at the different universities. I remember wrestling at Guelph and Brock and a lot of the universities over in Ontario. And then also he would be like, "Hey, you need a little bit more of a challenge." So I would be entered into the high school tournaments and the open tournaments. So and then there would be a tournament on a Saturday at this university, a tournament on a Sunday at that university. So I would enter, essentially 4 tournaments in a weekend, the open division, the college division on Saturday, and the same thing again on Sunday. So just getting that opportunity to constantly just be working on and crafting my abilities in the sport. So it was just experience and getting it crammed in a very fast, compact time frame.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, as you develop, you get better at technique, you learn more about strategy. But I mean, right from the get-go, you wrestle exciting style. You were scoring points, you were tossing people. I mean, that doesn't just happen accidentally. Just talk about your development and your skills.
So I think I learned. I think most people, if you've watched me and you've seen me wrestle, you would say that like a power double would be my signature move. But it actually, I didn't start off doing doubles originally. I like to do carries in the beginning, like fireman's carries, and then I would just try to learn a different technique a little bit. Each year, each practice, I try to add something to it. Like I had the opportunity of working with so many coaches in the Cleveland area, then going out to the training center and just doing camps throughout like the nation essentially. So just picking up all those different things. But one thing about me is I like big moves and I also like exciting matches. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to do those moves and I want to score like the most amount of points. And I also want to get pins. So I try to like, I don't go out with the mentality of like, oh, how can I make this match like entertaining and flashy? Although I do remember one time, I think Nationals was being televised on like ESPN or something along those lines. And they're like, hey, we heard you're the person to go to that'll give us an exciting match. Like, can you do something big? And so I think that that was the time that a good friend of mine that's still involved in the sport of wrestling, I threw her for 5 at the national finals, but it was just one of those things that kind of like, okay, why not?
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, hey, and college wrestling, right? That was available for you, but there really wasn't much going on with that. There were only a number of programs, and
Right.
you got hooked up with one of the early programs that really committed to it, and your program got pretty darn good. Do you feel good about the fact that you were able to not only have a college wrestling opportunity, but also college wrestling success, right? Your team was good as well.
Yes. So I remember going into my senior year in high school. I had to make a decision on what it was that I wanted to do as far as college. I had opportunities. I had numerous opportunities and coaches and training partners in Cleveland. But one of my biggest decisions was I wanted to be a part of a women's team. Like I wanted that camaraderie. I wanted to be in a room where, there are other females who went through the same trials and tribulations that I went through in the sport as well. So that was a deciding factor. I could have went to Cleveland State. I had a great support team there with coaches and athletes there, and that would have worked out really well. And they continued to work with me on breaks and things. But my goal was to go to a women's team. And at that time, I believe there were only a couple of programs. We had the University of the Cumberlands, which is where I ultimately went and wrestled and coached for. I think we had Missouri Valley and then Menlo.
Yeah, those were
And
the
so,
three biggies.
and
Yeah.
so I had the opportunity to visit and look at the climate and culture and all those environments. And Cumberland was just the best fit for me at that time. And I think it worked out. I met some of my greatest friends there and had just a really good run with the girls and athletes at the Cumberlands at that time.
So you were able to get on national teams, and I mean, just talk a little bit about your first world medal. I mean, for everyone, it's making a team is a big deal, but you went out and got yourself a medal right away, pretty
Yes.
early in your life. What was that tournament like? Because again, you were only fairly new to the sport. It's not like you'd been all over the world yet, right?
Yes. So I think I have to start with my junior silver. That was my first international trip, first time out of the country, first tournament. Like, so just that experience, I didn't know what to expect. It was the longest trip I think I had ever been on. We were out of the country for 22 days straight. So I had a little bit of homesickness. We had that first tournament. We did a warm-up tournament in Austria, and then we went on to, I think it was Nice, and we wrestled there. I came up short, took silver to Germany, and then I knew that I also had made that senior team as well. So my thought process going into that was like, I didn't get it at juniors. Let me try to go in and get it on the senior level, and came up short there also. Just had some really tough opponents there, but I attribute a lot of my growth and accolades to those people that I wrestled all over the world, like the Christine Norhagens and Japan, and those individuals, trial by fire, essentially. Like, I didn't beat them at those particular tournaments, but I did get wins eventually. So just, again, honing my sport and my craft, and being in a supportive environment like the Cumberlands, where I was able to train with the men's team and the women's team, getting tons of practice and mat time in so that I could take those skills onto the mat. So I was able to do a lot my freshman year in college, where 2001 was like a pretty amazing year. Although I came up short in both those world championships, I did eventually avenge those losses to those opponents, and then ultimately got the FILA International Female Wrestler of the Year in 2001 as well, which is like a really impressive accomplishment as an 18-year-old in college.
Oh, absolutely, right? And, but you also, the U.S. was having some pretty good teams. Coach Steiner
Yes.
got hired, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I guess my first question is, hey, they said wrestling is going to be an Olympic sport, and that was during the time when you were wrestling. What did it feel like to you to know that you were going to get that opportunity, that it wasn't for somebody else, but you were there and you had that chance to join the world in the Olympics?
So I think when you think of, when you have that opportunity to kind of sit back and reflect on it, I remember, they had been talking about it for a while. The World Championships was the pinnacle for women's wrestling at that point. So like you make a World Championship team, like I've made it to the top. Then we get these talks of the IOC, in debates going back and forth on if they were going to add women's wrestling. And then you start to get that little spark like, hey, like what if this happens? Like I can be an Olympian. And I think like when you're in sports, you think to yourself, like, what's the highest level? What's the biggest achievement you can get? And in our sport, that's the Olympics. So once that announcement was finally made, it was like, I'm going to be on that team. Like you don't think about the logistics. You don't think about anything else. Yeah. At first, you just make this determination in your mind and in your heart and your spirit. I am going to be on that team. So I think that was one of the first thoughts. Then like we had to make some more logistical planning and strategies because I was wrestling, I think 68 kilos at that time, and that wasn't one of the Olympic weight classes. So the thought was, do you drop down to 63 kilos or do you bump up to 72 kilos? So I attempted 63 and just didn't feel great there. So bumped up to 72 and also didn't feel spectacular there, but thought that I could develop and train a little bit better at the higher weight class and not have to focus so hard on nutrition and maintaining like a healthy weight and everything. So once I made the decision which weight class I was going to compete at, I just threw all my time and effort into becoming the best heavyweight that I could at that time.
Right.
72 kilos.
In women's, that's not super huge.
Right,
but
72 kilos is only about 158.6 pounds, but that was the decision that I made ultimately.
Well, and it led you to an opportunity to make an Olympic team,
yes.
right? And I mean, historic. We talk about that team. There were 4 women that were able to win the trials and earn that opportunity. We got a bunch of press, didn't we? I mean,
yes.
The world was paying attention to you 4, weren't they?
They really were. I feel like we spent as much time in training as we did doing like PR, different events and everything in Staten Island and New York and here and there. And it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Well, and 3 of the 4 people in that team are now in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's special, right? You get to join a few of your teammates here in Stillwater.
It is. The first time this past NCAA men's dual or national tournament, that was the first time all 4 of us had been in the same room since 2004. So like to get us together and we were doing all these talks and conversation and just kind of, going down memory lane, that was very exciting. And then those girls had also congratulated me on my induction as well. So it was a great experience. Like it's hard to think like that was 20 years ago, but ultimately like, time doesn't wait for anyone.
Yeah, and then there was the experience in Athens, right? And I mean, U.S. we didn't get our gold from anyone, but we had a good performance. And you didn't win your medal at that tournament.
Right.
What are your memories from wrestling there and just being on the Olympic stage? Because it was new for wrestling.
Correct.
Women.
So ultimately, it took me, in all honesty, it took me a very long time to sit back, think about that experience, process it, and accept it for what it was. Because ultimately, nobody who makes an Olympic team is going for the experience. No true athlete. Like you're going for the gold medal. So to come up short of that it was devastating. It was heartbreaking. And because of that, and at the time not being able to process those emotions and those feelings, I didn't get to fully process the experience of being an Olympian, being at the Olympic Village, going to the opening ceremony. So it took some time. It took a couple years of just working through those emotions and that process to actually sit back and be like, you know what? I'm an Olympian, and that's something not a ton of other people can say. And then just thinking back on some of those experiences, I think back to like opening ceremony where we went in and it's just like, we've been at tournaments before. We've gone to different opening ceremonies for different tournaments, but the Olympics takes a whole nother stage. And so just having that opportunity and the flashing lights and walking in with all these delegations and all these like top tier world class athletes is just something that a lot of people probably do miss at first. But then when you have that time, when your body and your mind kind of settle and you can sit back and process that, it's like you can't even necessarily put it into words what that actually feels like.
So you were part of a historic event when the United States went to the World Cup in Japan and we beat them. Right? Am I correct? It came down to you?
Yes.
Right.
And
So, I mean, talk about that, because I mean, we're still trying to win that World Cup again, right?
So,
and you guys went out and did it. And you know, we were at the car, and that got her done.
We that whole, so you have to like rewind a little bit to the World Championships at Madison Square Garden a few weeks prior.
Well, we tied.
And so we tied, and they won on criteria. And we also had an unprecedented amount of, I think, the only team in U.S. history that has medaled at every weight class. All seven women medaled at that weight, at that that World Championship. So, I mean, we had a lot of good takeaways, but again, coming up short, you know, we all felt a certain type of way, and it wasn't a great feeling. You know, even those individuals who actually won their weight class, you know, to see your team come up just short on something like criteria, I think we all were like, never again. So when we had that opportunity to move on to the the World Cup that was in Japan, I think our mindset, and I know mine specifically, was, you know, they took it away from us on our home turf. We're going to go in and do the same thing to them. I'm going to go in and take this away from them as well. So, you know, we had some very dynamic matches between a lot of the other countries that were there, but I think everyone knew it was going to come down to the U.S. and Japan. And I remember everyone warming up and we're getting ready. And Japan, if you haven't had the opportunity to compete or be there, the atmosphere is absolutely electrifying for women's wrestling.
Well, they love it.
They absolutely love it. They brought in all these like hundreds of school children who came in and they're cheering. And you also have like just the average spectators who came in. And it was just an electric atmosphere for this finals match leading up between ourselves and Japan. And I remember us warming up and Terry's giving us a speech, you know, like stick to the basics, do what you do best. And, you know, just the semantics of like a coach. And I remember us going down, like everyone's talking. He gave us a minute to say something. And I think I said something like, hey guys, we got this, but let's not leave it up to the heavyweight match to decide this match. And lo and behold, we get there and it's a tie score again, leading into this match. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, here we go. Like, but at that point, I had already processed this in my head. I had already thought about it. Like, no, like I come out on top in this one. And I think that like my game plan was to go in and set the tone and just kind of push that pace. And I was able to do that with some big points early on and just controlling risks and everything like that. And I just remember there's a picture out there where, you know, like we're going back and forth and you see that I get this double leg takedown and we're on the out of bounds. And the whole team is standing there because the point system was a little bit different, but they're holding up 3 and like the whole team, and you see them and the intensity on everyone's face and the compassion and like tenacity and everything that everyone is like behind me. Like, and to have that as any wrestler, you literally have all these people behind you, supporting you, pushing you, hoping for you. And that was all captured in this one picture. And I think about that often. I think about everything that led up to that moment in that picture and like just everything that was happening. And I'm so incredibly grateful for the opportunity.
So talk about transition from athlete to coach. I mean, you got to a point in your career and you had opportunities. And was coaching always something you wanted to do, or did it just kind of develop as your wrestling career went on?
It kind of developed. It happened where I had the opportunity of being on a team of, like we mentioned earlier, just some really amazing individuals. They did an astounding job as athletes. And I graduated a couple years before those individuals, but it was always one of those things where we were constantly pushing each other to be the best athlete that they could be, the best person that they could be. So it just was like a natural transition, essentially. Like I didn't plan on being a coach. Like I didn't have like aspirations of being a coach or anything like that. But it was more so like I want to stay around and help my former teammates. I want to make sure that they are reaching those goals that they set for themselves. So I just transitioned into that role where I was able to help the Jessica Medinas and the Othello Lucases, all those people, and just really help them, you know, do what it was that they wanted to do in the sport as well. And then the opportunity arose where I kind of, you know, like you are like a bird in the nest, you have to be pushed out. And then Lindenwood was like, hey, we have this spot. We think that you would fit perfectly. So going over there and starting, or not necessarily starting, but taking over that program that was there and cultivating those athletes and recruiting and bringing in more talent to get like the national champion or the national two national champions that I got and the All-Americans that I had over the years was a process. It started off very humbling, you know, where you're just worried about yourself. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go out here and win this match. But then to be able to instill that in the athletes that you're working in, like, yes, you're going to go out there and win this match. And you have to kind of work. You have to build those relationships. You have to help them develop that confidence and that inner fire within themselves so that they have that same mentality. Like, yeah, I can win this match. Coach said I can win this match. I'm going to win this match. And just going on from there.
Yeah, and you must develop some pretty good relationships with your athletes. I mean, even today we're hearing about how part of the success they had is because they knew you believed in them and were willing to work hard with them to reach their goals. I mean, was there some satisfaction during the years when you saw somebody progress to the point where they were able to do very well?
Absolutely. There's so many different ways that I could go with this and so many different individuals, but there were just athletes who came in. I was never a coach that went solely after the top recruits in the country. Like, I was always confident in my ability to develop athletes and bring out their best form in the sport. And so, like, to see an athlete who came in as a green freshman, didn't have a ton of experience, they didn't have like these high accolades from Fargo or Body Bar or anything like that, but then to bring them in as a freshman and help them develop, and all of a sudden now they are checking off these boxes. Now they are going on some of these Pan Am teams because they qualified at Body Bar, or they are in the finals of the national championships. And to see them build and develop from, a green freshman where not too many other coaches were looking at them to like, they're looking like, oh, you need to watch out for that Lindenwood girl. Like that's going to be a tough match. You're going to have to grind it out. Like, we're going to have to do X, Y, Z. So to have that ability to pull out the best in those athletes over time was like one of my highest accomplishments. I just absolutely love looking at the development of a first year wrestler in college all the way up until their senior year in college, and just see the growth that they were able to cultivate in themselves, not only as wrestlers, but as young women as well.
I mean, do you take pride in the fact that you were the first African-American woman to wrestle for the United States, and you also maybe be a role model for other kids coming up that saw your success in a sport maybe they hadn't even considered, right?
It's one of those things. I think I tell people, like, at the time, like, you don't even realize it. To hear the word trailblazer, or like, you've done this, or you're a role model, you were a mentor, or somebody I looked up to you. At the time, had no idea that that's what was happening. But then to see those people, the Randy Millers, the Tamara Mensahs, those people who come after Iris, although Iris was on the scene and there because she was one of the people I looked up to, but to see her win her first world championship was just such an honor to kind of think that somebody had that thought process. Like, oh, I saw Toccara do it, so I want to do it. I know I can do it. Like I said, at the time, you don't really think about it in that way. But then as you have time, you develop, you grow, you get a different perspective. And I'm honored that I had that effect on, if it was just one person, like, hey, this person looks like me. This person represents a culture that is similar to my own. I want to also do that. Like, I find that to be one of the highest honors.
So just your thoughts about the state of women's wrestling now. I mean, from where it was when you got started to where it was when you were a college coach. I mean, wow, right?
Yes.
What's your thoughts about the rapid growth and the expansion of opportunity for women in wrestling?
It's one of those things, like, this was the goal, like, when I went from being like the only girl in a high school gym who had to change in a bathroom that was open that weekend because they didn't think to open the girls' locker room, to like this entire weekend, some 400 girls are at this tournament and it's just a girls' tournament. Like, this was ultimately the goal. This was ultimately, like, we heard some other speakers that blood, sweat, and tears. This is where we wanted to be. And I think every time I look on social media and I see, hey, this state has sanctioned girls wrestling in high school, I think about all the opportunities. I think about all the girls who are in spaces that are now welcoming and inviting to them. And I think that it was worth it for the times when I entered a space that wasn't welcoming. I think it was all worth it so that these girls now have these opportunities to say, hey, I can choose between 100 schools for college, instead of 3. Like, it was all worth it. Like, because to look at that growth, and you just keep seeing it. You keep seeing it on each side. You see the high school development, and you see the college development, and it, like, again, full circle, where, we started off with this handful to now I would be hard pressed to name like half of the colleges that have women's wrestling.
Me too, and I studied them.
And I think that that's absolutely amazing, but that was ultimately always the goal. I mean, we still have some work to do, but we're in a really good, sound place right now.
And the Hall of Fame's been welcoming to women lately too, right? I
Yes.
mean, a lot of your friends and peers and stuff have been honored like you have been. I mean, what's the future of women's wrestling from this point forward? Is it going to keep going like it's going now? Could it be where it's as big as the boys' side? Do you see any limits?
Right now, I think it's just opportunity. I think that there is so much out there that is still yet to have been tapped. And so I feel like we are at a point, like we're right on that cusp. Like we've been going up and we're right there, and we're about to just explode on a different level. We're also entering a stage now where a lot of the girls who have been competing in some of these earlier cycles, they're now about to transition from athlete to coach. And I think that just deepens the pool. I think that just really opens up what the possibilities are for women's wrestling, to bring the, like these Victoria Anthony's, Helen Moreles's, and some of these other like high named athletes onto this platform where hopefully they'll continue to give back into the sport from a different viewpoint of a coach, hopefully to keep them involved, to see them, Clarissa Chun at Iowa was huge, absolutely huge. And I think like, who's next? Like, what's the next Big Ten school that's going to follow? Can we get someone over at Penn State? Is Ohio State like around the corner? Ohio State.
Yeah. How about that?
So
notice this, Buckeyes.
I'm waiting to see that. I'm waiting to see what the next big opportunity is for women's wrestling.
Well, this has been fun, Toccara. I'm so proud of you and joyful that you are having this weekend, because you are one of the people that made a big difference in this sport. And I have just enjoyed sharing it with you. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Gary.
Be well.
All right.